Who could imagine that a millionaire CEO, who thought blind dates were nothing but a business deal, would sit at the wrong table, across from a poor single mother with her little girl, and discover the laughter he had been missing his whole life? Two strangers, one mistake, and a night that would turn into a story none of them could ever forget. Before we dive into the story, comment below where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, everyone. Nathan Benton adjusted his cufflinks with the same precision he used to analyze financial reports. Every detail had to be sharp, controlled, flawless. Blind dates, however, were something he despised. But his board members, and especially his mother, insisted he needed a suitable companion. 10 dates had already gone by in a blur of designer gowns, flawless makeup, and practiced smiles. He had turned them all down. Tonight was supposed to be his final attempt before declaring the whole experiment a failure. The restaurant buzzed with soft jazz and muted conversations. The host led Nathan to a candlelit table near the window. He glanced at his watch. His date wasn't there yet. Typical. He hated waiting. With a sigh, he loosened his tie slightly and scanned the room. That's when he saw her. A woman with warm brown hair tied loosely at the back, sitting at a table near the entrance. She wore a simple navy dress that looked slightly worn at the seams but carried herself with an air of quiet strength. Beside her sat a little girl, maybe 6 years old, doodling on a paper napkin with colored pencils. The child's laughter carried across the room like a spark in the dark. The host motioned Nathan toward another corner, but for reasons he couldn't quite explain, Nathan ignored him. Instead, he walked straight to the table with the woman and the child. "Miss Harper?" he asked, his voice deep and commanding. Maya Harper blinked up at him, startled. She hadn't expected anyone to approach her. Her sister had pushed her into this whole blind date nonsense, signing her up on an elite site she had no business being on. She had promised herself she would sit here just long enough to say she tried, then leave. But now this tall man with sharp features and piercing gray eyes stood before her, mistaking her for someone else. "Yes," Maya said quickly before she could think. She wasn't sure why she said it. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, as if he already knew this was supposed to be her seat. Nathan sat down, his movements smooth, controlled. Sophie, her daughter, stopped drawing and tilted her head, studying him with the unfiltered curiosity only children possessed. "Mom," Sophie whispered not so quietly. "Is this the fancy man you said you weren't going to like?" Maya's cheeks burned. Nathan raised an eyebrow but said nothing, his expression unreadable. "I'm Sophie," the girl announced boldly, extending her small hand. "Do you like crayons?" For a moment, the famously cold CEO was caught off guard. He stared at the little hand, then at the wide-eyed child, and something in his chest cracked open. Slowly, he reached out and shook her hand. "I suppose I do now," he said. Maya almost choked on her water. She had expected him to scowl, maybe get up and leave. Instead, he stayed, and Sophie, her fearless, outspoken daughter, began to chatter away about school projects, her favorite cartoons, and how her goldfish at home probably hated her singing. Nathan listened, truly listened, and before long, Maya noticed something she thought impossible. The corner of his mouth twitched. A smile. Real. Human. Fragile, as if it hadn't been used in years. The waiter appeared with menus. Nathan ordered with practiced ease. But when Maya hesitated, embarrassed by the prices, he leaned in. "Order what you'd like. Don't think about the numbers." Her chin lifted. "I always think about numbers. Single moms don't get the luxury of ignoring them." That struck him harder than she realized. Nathan, who had measured life only in profit margins, was suddenly confronted with a woman who counted pennies to feed her child. And yet she spoke with humor, not pity. With strength, not shame. As the evening unfolded, Maya's nerves faded. She cracked jokes about mysterious spoons and teased him for using the word productive 3 times in one sentence. Sophie, with her innocent boldness, asked questions Nathan had never faced on any date before. Why don't you smile more? Don't you like people? Nathan blinked, caught. Maya's face flushed. Sophie. But Nathan surprised them both. I suppose I forgot how, he admitted softly. It was such a simple truth, yet it weighed in the air heavier than any business deal he had ever signed. Maya felt her chest tighten. This man wasn't just rich. He was lonely, and her daughter, fearless little Sophie, had managed to touch a part of him no one else had reached. By the end of the dinner, Maya told herself it was just an accident, a mix-up, something that would never happen again. Nathan told himself the same, but deep down, both of them knew the wrong table had been the right one all along. Nathan Benton had never invited anyone to his family home without careful consideration. The sprawling estate on the outskirts of the city wasn't just a house. It was a fortress of his success, the proof of a man who had conquered every obstacle except loneliness. The last time someone new had walked those marble halls, it had been a potential business partner, not a woman, and certainly never a woman who came with a child. Yet somehow, after that unexpected evening at the restaurant, Nathan had found himself dialing Maya's number. He told himself it was out of curiosity, maybe even politeness, but the truth was simpler. He hadn't been able to forget the sound of Sophie's laugh, or the way Maya had said things no one else dared say to him. Her honesty had been like a slap and a bomb all at once. So here he was, waiting at the grand entrance, feeling strangely nervous for the first time in years. When Maya arrived, she wore a modest cream blouse tucked into a navy skirt. Sophie clutched her hand, skipping slightly with each step, her braid bouncing. The little girl's wide eyes grew even wider as she looked up at the high ceilings and polished chandeliers. It looks like a castle, Sophie whispered, tugging at her mother's sleeve. Do we have to bow? Nathan actually chuckled. Not unless you'd like to, he said, bending slightly in a mock bow that made Sophie giggle. Maya, on the other hand, looked out of place. Her eyes lingered on the expensive artwork, the carved banisters, the polished silver in the dining room. She felt like she had stepped into a world that wasn't hers, and never would be. Nathan's mother, Eleanor Benton, swept into the room with the kind of grace only years of high society could teach. Her hair was pinned perfectly, her pearl earrings catching the light. At first glance, she seemed every bit the cold matriarch Maya had feared meeting. But then Eleanor's gaze softened when it landed on Sophie. And who might you be? Eleanor asked, kneeling down so she was eye level with the child. I'm Sophie, she said brightly. I draw fishes that can fly. Want to see? She pulled a folded napkin from her pocket with a scribbled picture on it. Eleanor's laughter, genuine and delighted, filled the room. I would love to. I think this one should go in a frame. Maya's shoulders relaxed slightly. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Dinner began in the formal dining room, a table long enough to seat 20, though there were only 4 of them. Sophie sat between her mother and Nathan, swinging her legs and asking an endless stream of questions. Do you eat here every night? Why are there so many forks? Do rich people ever eat pizza? Nathan found himself answering each one, sometimes fumbling, sometimes laughing, but always engaged. Eleanor watched her son with quiet amazement. For the first time in years, his face wasn't hard stone. He looked alive, but the warmth didn't last. Halfway through the meal, the doors opened and in swept Vivien, Nathan's former fiancée. Tall, elegant, and perfectly styled, she moved like she owned the place. No one had expected her, and certainly not Maya. Nathan, Vivien purred, leaning to kiss him on the cheek. You didn't tell me you were entertaining. Her sharp eyes flicked to Maya, then down to Sophie and back up again. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. Oh, I see. Maya stiffened. She hadn't signed up for this. She had been tricked into blind dates by her sister, not into becoming someone's charity project. Vivien sat herself down uninvited, her diamond bracelets clinking as she lifted a glass of wine. How refreshing, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Nathan, you've always had impeccable taste, but this is different. A single mother? From, where did you say you work again, dear? Maya's throat tightened, but she lifted her chin. I'm an assistant at a local office, she said evenly. And I'm proud of the work I do. Vivien's smirk widened. Of course you are. Silence pressed down like a weight. Nathan's jaw clenched, his eyes flicking between the two women. Sophie, sensing the tension, reached for his hand under the table. Don't be mad, she whispered, as if her little voice could soothe him. That was the moment something inside Nathan shifted. He turned to Vivien, his tone cold and sharp. You're not welcome here tonight. Leave. Vivien blinked in shock. She had expected him to brush her behavior aside, to allow her cruelty. Instead, he was defending someone else. Defending Maya. I said leave, Nathan repeated, standing now, his presence towering. Vivien rose, her face flushed with humiliation, and swept out without another word. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya wanted to melt into the floor. She hated scenes, hated conflict, hated being the cause of tension in a house that wasn't hers. I'm sorry, she whispered, gathering her things. We shouldn't have come. Nathan reached for her arm, but she pulled away gently. It's too much, Nathan. This isn't my world. Sophie's hand squeezed her mother's tightly as they headed toward the door. Eleanor rose as if to stop them, but Nathan shook his head. He could see it in Maya's eyes, the wall she had built to protect herself. For the first time in a long time, Nathan Benton felt powerless, and it terrified him. For 3 days, Nathan couldn't focus. Numbers blurred on the screen, contracts felt hollow, and meetings became background noise. Every time he tried to speak about quarterly reports, his mind replayed Maya's words, "This isn't my world," and the look in her eyes as she held Sophie's hand and walked out of his house. It had been final, like a door closing with no key left behind. He wasn't used to this feeling. Powerless, vulnerable, alone in his own mansion that suddenly felt like a museum of achievements no one cared about. On the 4th day, his phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Sophie forgot her crayons at your place. Could you drop them off if you find them? Nathan didn't even think. He was already in his car. When Maya opened the door of her small apartment, she looked surprised to see him holding not only the crayons but also 2 bags of groceries. Sophie squealed, running to grab the crayons, and immediately began drawing on the floor by the couch. You didn't have to bring food, Maya said, crossing her arms. I wanted to, Nathan replied simply. Maya studied him carefully, as if trying to see whether there was an agenda behind his words. But when Sophie tugged on his sleeve and asked, "Can you help me make a fish with wings?" he sat down on the floor in his expensive suit without hesitation. Together, they drew clumsy creatures that looked more like chickens with fins, but Sophie's laughter filled the room until even Maya had to smile. It became the start of something unplanned. Nathan began stopping by after work, sometimes with takeout, sometimes just with a story about his day. He never stayed long, never pushed, but always found himself drawn back. And Sophie welcomed him as if he had always been there, demanding he read bedtime stories in his deep, serious voice that somehow made fairy tales sound like boardroom speeches. One evening, Maya caught him struggling to assemble a second-hand bookshelf Sophie had been given. He was sweating, his tie loosened, the manual spread across the floor like a battlefield. "Give me that," Maya teased, kneeling beside him. "You can build empires, but not a bookshelf?" Nathan laughed, really laughed, and the sound startled them both. For a moment, the distance between their worlds seemed smaller. But the real turning point came when Eleanor visited. She appeared unannounced at Maya's door one Saturday afternoon, bearing a basket of baked goods. Maya braced herself, ready for judgment. But Eleanor's eyes softened at the sight of Sophie perched on Nathan's shoulders, giggling as he pretended to be a horse. "May I come in?" Eleanor asked gently. The afternoon turned into tea and stories. Eleanor spoke about Nathan as a boy, shy and serious, who rarely played with other children. Sophie interrupted with her own stories, filling in the silence Nathan never could. By the end of the visit, Eleanor reached for Maya's hand and whispered, "You've given me my son back." Maya swallowed hard, fighting tears. She didn't want this to be temporary. She didn't want Sophie to get attached only to have him vanish. But in Nathan's eyes that night, she saw something she hadn't seen before. Not just curiosity, not just intrigue, but genuine longing. It was during those weeks that Nathan invited her to join a project close to his heart, a charity gala his company hosted every year, funding schools for underprivileged children. He admitted quietly that the event had always felt empty, more about appearances than change. "Help me make it real," he asked. Maya hesitated but agreed, and so they worked side by side, planning games instead of speeches, food stands instead of stiff banquets. Sophie insisted there should be balloons big enough to touch the sky, and Nathan actually wrote it down like a serious note. For the first time, Maya saw him not as the CEO in tailored suits, but as a man who wanted to make children laugh. Their closeness grew in stolen glances, in late-night phone calls about details that turned into confessions, in moments when their hands brushed as they pinned decorations. And when Sophie fell asleep on the couch during one of their planning sessions, Nathan carried her gently to bed, tucking the blanket around her with a tenderness that made Maya's chest ache. Yet despite the warmth building between them, shadows lingered. Maya couldn't forget the sting of Vivien's words, the reminder that people like her didn't belong in Nathan's world. And Nathan, though drawn to Maya like he had never been to anyone else, couldn't silence the whispers of doubt his past betrayals had carved into him. Still, on the night before the gala, as they stood in the nearly finished venue with balloons swaying above them, Sophie's voice echoed in the empty hall. "Mom," she said, tugging Maya's hand, "can we keep him?" The innocence of it nearly broke Maya's heart. Nathan heard it too, his breath catching, his eyes locking with hers. For a moment it felt like yes, like this could be forever. But forever has a way of testing people. And the test was already on its way. The gala was supposed to be perfect. For the first time, Nathan Benton felt proud of an event not because of the polished speeches or the glittering gowns, but because of the laughter of children running between balloon arches and the sight of Sophie tugging a balloon twice her size across the hall. Maya moved gracefully through the crowd, not in a designer dress but in a simple sapphire gown borrowed from a friend. And yet she shone brighter than anyone there. Nathan had introduced her to several colleagues, calling her my partner in this project. Though his eyes said more than his words ever could, Eleanor stood nearby, quietly watching the transformation in her son. She saw how his gaze followed Maya, how his shoulders softened in her presence, how Sophie's hand in his seemed as natural as breathing. But in the crowd lurked Vivien. She hadn't forgiven the humiliation of being cast out from his home weeks earlier. Tonight, she was determined not to be ignored. With her sharp heels clicking against the marble floor, she approached Nathan with a smile painted in venom. "Congratulations, darling," she said sweetly, though her eyes were cold. "You've managed to turn a charity gala into a playground." Nathan's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Vivien's gaze slid to Maya. "And here's the reason, of course. Miss Harper, isn't it? Such an inspiring story. Single mother, struggling paycheck to paycheck, suddenly finding herself at the side of one of the most powerful men in the city." Maya's spine stiffened, but she held her tongue. Vivien leaned closer to Nathan, lowering her voice just enough for the sting to land. "Don't you wonder how much of this was coincidence? Or did you think she just happened to be seated at your table that night? Nathan, darling, she knew exactly who you were. She played you, and she used that child to do it." Nathan froze, the words lodged like shards of glass in his chest. Vivien smirked, pulling a slim folder from her clutch. "I did a little digging. Isn't it fascinating what you can find? Screenshots, messages, even an old email where her sister mentions your name. She knew, Nathan. She's been after your fortune from the beginning." She placed the folder in his hand, kissed his cheek like a final dagger, and swept away. The world around him blurred. The children's laughter, the music, the chatter, all muffled under the roar of suspicion that surged inside him. He shouldn't have opened the folder, but he did. Pages of half-truths, twisted emails, out-of-context lines that painted Maya in the darkest light. And when his eyes lifted, they found her. She was across the room, holding Sophie in her arms as the girl showed Eleanor her drawing of a balloon fish. Maya's smile was radiant, unguarded, trusting. For a moment, Nathan wanted to throw the folder into the trash and never look back. But the old scars of betrayal, the lessons he'd learned from years of people wanting him for his money, screamed louder. When Maya approached him later, cheeks flushed from the joy of the evening, she noticed the storm in his eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked softly. He held up the folder, his voice sharp. "You tell me." Maya blinked, confused, then leafed through the papers. Her face drained of color. "Where did you get this?" "So it's true." His voice was low, dangerous. "No, Nathan, this is twisted. Yes, my sister knew your name. She told me about this dating site, but I didn't know it would be you. I never planned this. I never used Sophie. I would never." "Stop." His tone cut like ice. "Do you think I haven't seen this before? People pretending, playing roles, saying they don't care about the money until the moment they have their hands on it. I thought you were different, Maya. I was wrong." Maya's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. "You think I wanted this?" she whispered fiercely. "You think I brought Sophie into your world as some kind of scheme? I came to a blind date because my sister begged me. That's it. The rest," her voice broke, "the rest was real. At least for me." Nathan's chest ached, but his pride and fear forced the next words out. "It was a mistake." Maya stared at him, stunned into silence. For a long moment, she simply held his gaze, letting him see the heartbreak written all over her face. Then she nodded, gathering Sophie's hand into her own. "Come on, sweetheart," she said softly to her daughter. "We're leaving." Sophie looked up at Nathan with wide, confused eyes. "But why? I like it here." Maya's voice trembled. "Not every place is meant for us, baby." As they walked away, Sophie turned back one last time. "Don't be sad, Mr. Nathan," she said, her little voice carrying across the room. "You just forgot how to smile again." And with that, they were gone. Nathan stood in the middle of the glittering gala, folder still clutched in his hand, feeling as though the entire world had collapsed under the weight of one choice. He had built an empire by trusting no one, And now, in protecting himself from pain, he had driven away the only people who had ever made him feel alive. The silence in Nathan's penthouse was deafening. He had sent his staff away, turned off his phone, even skipped meetings for the first time in years. But no matter how hard he tried to bury himself in work, Maya's voice echoed in his mind. The rest was real, at least for me. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, something he rarely allowed, and stared out at the city skyline. For a man who owned half the towers glittering before him, he had never felt poorer. 3 days passed in that fog until his mother, Eleanor, arrived unannounced. She didn't wait for his invitation. She stormed in, heels clicking against the marble, and slapped a folder onto his desk. The same folder Vivien had given him. "Where did you get this filth?" Eleanor demanded, eyes blazing. Nathan's stomach dropped. "You've seen it. I've done more than see it. I've investigated it. This," she jabbed a finger at the documents, "is manufactured garbage." Vivien hired a private investigator and paid him to stitch together half-truths and old emails. "It's a setup, Nathan. And you fell for it." He felt the air leave his lungs. "You're certain?" Eleanor's voice softened, though her disappointment was sharp. "I spoke to the investigator myself. He admitted it when cornered. She wanted to ruin Maya, and she succeeded because you let your fear blind you. My son, you lost a good woman because you couldn't trust your own heart." Nathan sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands. The weight of shame crushed him. Maya had told him the truth. She had looked him in the eyes, begging him to believe her, and he hadn't. "I need to fix this," he whispered hoarsely. "Then fix it," Eleanor said simply. "But this time, don't do it with contracts or money. Do it with humility. Do it with love." That night, Nathan drove to Maya's apartment. The lights were off, the curtains drawn. He knocked anyway. "Maya, it's me," he called softly. "Please, just give me a moment." No answer. He stood there for what felt like hours until finally a neighbor poked her head out and said, "She left. Packed up yesterday. Said she needed space." Panic surged through him. Where had she gone? The next day, Nathan found out. His assistant mentioned that a children's fair was being held downtown, a small community event, and one of the sponsors' names caught his attention. Maya Harper. He didn't think twice. He was already on his way. The fair was a swirl of bright tents, sticky candy, and laughter. Nathan spotted her near the stage, helping Sophie paint faces for a line of eager children. Maya looked radiant even in a simple t-shirt and jeans. Her hair pulled back, her smile warm but faintly tired. Nathan's heart twisted. She looked happy, but he knew it wasn't the full truth. Not without him. Not without what they had begun to build. He walked toward her, but Sophie saw him first. Her brush dropped, leaving a streak of blue across her own cheek. "Mr. Nathan!" she cried, running into his arms before Maya could stop her. Nathan lifted her easily, holding her close. "Hey, little fish," he murmured, his voice thick. "I've missed you." Maya froze, her hand tightening around the paintbrush. "Put her down," she said quietly but firmly. Nathan obeyed, kneeling so he was eye level with Sophie before releasing her hand. Then he turned to Maya. "I was wrong," he said simply, his voice carrying across the fair. People had started to notice, the powerful CEO kneeling in the dirt, speaking to a single mother. But Nathan didn't care. "Maya, I let fear poison me. I let Vivien trick me. I doubted you when you deserved my trust most. And I will regret that every day until you forgive me." Her eyes shimmered, but her voice was steady. "Do you know how much it hurt, Nathan, to be accused of using my own child? To have the one man I thought might see me as more than a mistake throw me aside. He nodded, pain etched into his features. I know, and I don't expect forgiveness to come easily. But I'm here, publicly, because the world should know. You and Sophie are my family. Not someday, not maybe, now, always. The crowd murmured. Cameras lifted. Nathan Benton, the untouchable CEO, was on his knees confessing his heart. Maya's throat closed. She wanted to run to protect herself. But then Sophie tugged her hand and whispered, "Mom." He came back. Maybe he remembered how to smile. Tears spilled down Maya's cheeks. Nathan's gray eyes locked with hers, raw and desperate. "Give me one more chance," he pleaded. "Not as a CEO, not as a man with money, just as Nathan, the man who loves you, the man who wants to be Sophie's dad." The fair went quiet, all eyes on her. And in that silence, Maya Harper felt the walls around her heart begin to crack. The fair continued around them, but for Nathan, time had frozen. Maya stood before him, her hand trembling in Sophie's small grasp, the weight of his confession pressing down between them. He had bared himself in front of strangers, but he knew it wasn't enough. Words, no matter how raw, couldn't undo the wound he had caused. He needed to do more. He needed to prove that the man she thought was made only of steel and marble could also be ridiculous, vulnerable, and hers. He excused himself briefly, vanishing into one of the colorful tents. Maya frowned, confused, while Sophie giggled, her eyes sparkling with mischief as if she somehow knew what was coming. Minutes later, a ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Out from the tent came Nathan Benton, the man who ruled boardrooms with an iron voice, wearing a giant, padded costume of a smiling ice cream cone. His sharp features were hidden under foam sprinkles and a ridiculous cherry hat. The mighty CEO looked absolutely absurd. And yet he walked straight toward Maya, his stride confident but his eyes vulnerable. Children squealed, pointing and laughing, and soon everyone had gathered to watch. Nathan stopped in front of Maya, dropped to one knee, the costume squeaking comically as he did, and took her hand. "Maya Harper," he declared, his deep voice muffled slightly inside the suit. "I have built towers that scrape the sky. I have signed contracts worth billions. But none of it has ever mattered because I was empty. And then you and Sophie sat across from me at the wrong table, and suddenly everything was right. You reminded me that life isn't about perfection. It's about laughter, crayons, and sometimes even ice cream cones that look completely ridiculous." The crowd burst into warm laughter and applause. Sophie clapped her hands wildly, jumping up and down. Nathan continued, his voice breaking. "I doubted you when you deserved trust. I hurt you when I should have protected you. And now, in front of everyone, I want to say I'm sorry. Not just with words, but with my life. I don't care about pride anymore. I don't care about what the world thinks of me. All I care about is you, Maya, and Sophie. Let me be the man who never forgets how to smile again." From inside the cone, he pulled out a small velvet box. The ridiculousness of the gesture, a foam ice cream proposing, only made the moment more powerful. Gasps echoed through the fair as Nathan opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. "Maya Harper," he said, his voice steady now. "Will you marry me? Will you let me be Sophie's father, not by blood, but by choice? Because my choice is you. Always." Maya's tears spilled freely, her chest tight with a storm of emotions. She wanted to laugh at the costume, to scold him for making a spectacle, to kiss him all at once. Sophie tugged her mother's hand and whispered urgently, "Say yes, Mom, please." The crowd began chanting softly, then louder, "Say yes, say yes, say yes." Maya pressed her hands to her mouth, overwhelmed. For so long, she had felt invisible, like her life was a struggle unnoticed by the world. And now the most powerful man she had ever met was kneeling before her in the silliest outfit imaginable, begging for her heart in front of everyone. She lowered her hands slowly, her voice shaking but clear. "Yes," she whispered. Nathan's breath caught. "Yes, yes," she repeated, louder this time, smiling through her tears. "Yes, Nathan Benton. Yes to you. Yes to Sophie. Yes to us." The crowd erupted in cheers. Balloons floated higher, and Sophie leapt into Nathan's arms with uncontained joy. "We're a family now," she shouted. Nathan laughed, tears of his own sliding down his cheeks. For the first time in decades, his smile was unguarded, messy, and completely real. And in that moment, a billionaire in an ice cream suit, a mother with tears on her cheeks, and a little girl grinning wide enough to light up the sky, the world finally felt right. The proposal at the fair had gone viral. By the next morning, videos of the powerful, untouchable Nathan Benton kneeling in an ice cream suit for a poor single mother were everywhere. Some headlines were heartwarming. CEO finds love in sweetest way possible. Others were cruel. Gold digger wins the jackpot. Maya hadn't been prepared for the storm. She woke up to dozens of calls, reporters at her door, and strangers analyzing her life as if it were a public spectacle. Sophie, too young to understand the weight of gossip, simply asked, "Mom, why are people saying mean things if they don't even know us?" Maya's chest tightened. She wanted to hide, to retreat into the quiet life she had fought so hard to build. But Nathan wouldn't let her. That afternoon, he arrived at her apartment with Eleanor and a convoy of black cars. "Pack a bag," he told her gently. "You're coming with me." Maya shook her head. "Nathan, the world is calling me a gold digger. They're saying I trapped you. I can't." "Stop," Nathan interrupted firmly. He stepped closer, cupping her face with both hands, his gray eyes steady. "You don't have to defend yourself to them. That's my job, and I'm going to do it." 2 days later, Nathan held a press conference. The hall was filled with flashing cameras, reporters jostling for the best shot, the hum of whispers buzzing like angry bees. At his side stood Maya, her shoulders tense, holding Sophie's hand. Eleanor sat in the front row, her presence a quiet pillar of strength. Nathan stepped up to the podium, his suit immaculate, his expression calm but resolute. He looked out at the sea of cameras, then back at Maya and Sophie. For once, he didn't feel alone under the lights. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice carrying with practiced authority. "You all know me as a CEO, as a businessman. But today, I'm here as a man and as a father." Gasps rippled through the room. Reporters scribbled furiously. Nathan continued, his tone unwavering. "Yes, I proposed to Maya Harper. Yes, she is a single mother. And yes, her daughter Sophie is now my daughter, too. Not because of contracts, not because of money, because they are my family. And if anyone here believes love can be measured in bank accounts or last names, you've forgotten what love actually is." The cameras flashed wildly, but Nathan didn't stop. "I allowed lies and manipulation to poison me once. I doubted the one woman who brought light back into my life. I will not make that mistake again. Anyone who calls Maya a gold digger insults me, not her, because I am the one who begged for her forgiveness. I am the one who knelt in the dirt wearing an ice cream cone to prove I would choose her over pride every single time." A ripple of laughter spread through the hall, easing the tension. Even Maya's lips twitched despite her nerves. Nathan's gaze softened as he turned slightly toward Maya and Sophie. This is not a fairy tale about a poor girl and a rich man. This is about a mother strong enough to raise a child with love and honesty. About a little girl brave enough to ask me why I never smiled. And about a man who finally realized that without them, all the wealth in the world is worthless. The hall went silent. Even the reporters lowered their pens for a moment. Sophie, too small to understand the magnitude of the scene, tugged on Nathan's sleeve and whispered loudly enough for the microphones to catch. "Daddy, are we done yet? I'm hungry." The crowd erupted in laughter, and Nathan bent down, scooping her into his arms. "Almost little fish," he whispered. Then he turned back to the cameras one final time. "I will spend the rest of my life proving to Maya and Sophie that love, not power, defines who I am. And if anyone here doubts it, you're welcome to watch. Because we're not hiding anymore." He stepped away from the podium, wrapping his free arm around Maya's shoulders. For the first time since the storm had begun, she felt safe, protected, seen. The flashes continued, but they no longer mattered. The world could talk. Let them. Because in that moment, Nathan Benton had given her something no amount of money could ever buy. A place where she and Sophie truly belonged. The storm around them didn't vanish overnight. The tabloids still ran headlines, paparazzi still camped outside Nathan's office, and social media still speculated about every move they made. But something had shifted. Where before Maya had felt like she was drowning under waves of judgment, now she felt anchored by Nathan's unwavering presence, by Eleanor's protective warmth, and by Sophie's simple, innocent joy. A month after the press conference, the Parker Benton Foundation officially launched with its first event in the Monroe Mansion Gardens. It wasn't a gala of champagne and string quartets. It was a festival of laughter. Tents filled with art, music, science experiments, and, of course, ice cream. Children ran through the lawns painting faces, building forts from cushions, and singing karaoke while donors clapped and joined in. Maya stood at the heart of it all, clipboard in hand, making sure every detail ran smoothly. She looked more radiant than she had in years, her hair shining in the afternoon sun, her voice steady as she directed volunteers. This was her world now, not just surviving, but creating something meaningful. And Nathan, standing off to the side in rolled-up sleeves, watching her with pride, knew he had never admired anyone more. Sophie, her cheeks streaked with glitter paint, tugged at Nathan's arm. "Daddy, come play tag with us." He knelt down, smiling. "Daddy, huh?" She giggled. "Well, you said I could call you that any time I wanted." Nathan's throat tightened. "I did, and it's the best thing I've ever been called." He scooped her up and spun her around, her laughter ringing like bells across the garden. For a man who once measured his worth in profit margins and quarterly reports, this moment felt like true wealth. A few weeks later, the wedding came quietly, almost unexpectedly. Maya hadn't wanted a spectacle, no ballroom, no extravagant displays. Instead, they chose the park where Sophie liked to feed ducks, a place filled with ordinary families, strollers, and laughter. Eleanor insisted on arranging flowers, Riley made jokes through the ceremony, and Grandma Helen wore her bright purple hat like a crown. Nathan waited under a simple archway, nerves uncharacteristically fluttering in his stomach. He had negotiated billion-dollar contracts without blinking, but the sight of Maya walking toward him in a modest cream dress made his knees weak. She smiled through her tears. "You look scared, Mr. Benton." "I am," he admitted softly, his voice trembling, "because I still can't believe you said yes." "Then believe it again," she whispered, slipping her hand into his. The vows were simple, heartfelt. Nathan promised to never let fear drive him again, to protect not just with wealth but with presence. Maya promised to keep reminding him that laughter was as important as legacy. Sophie, impatient as ever, interrupted to announce loudly, "Can we kiss already?" sending the guests into laughter. And when the kiss finally came, it wasn't the kind of kiss that belonged to magazines or fairy tales. It was real, tender, a little messy, but full of everything they had fought through to get here. The celebration after was exactly what Maya had dreamed of and Nathan hadn't known he needed. Children played games, adults danced to lively music, and an ice cream cart stood proudly at the center of it all, a playful reminder of how it all began. Later, as the sun set, Nathan found himself standing with Maya and Sophie beneath a tree strung with fairy lights. Sophie leaned against him, tired but smiling, her Buzz Lightyear toy still clutched in one hand. "Do you know what today means?" Nathan asked softly. Sophie yawned. "That we get cake?" He chuckled. "That too. But it also means we're a real family now." Sophie tilted her head, considering. Then she wrapped her arms around both of them and whispered, "We always were. Now it's just official." Maya pressed her face into Nathan's shoulder, her tears warm against his shirt. For once, they weren't tears of pain or fear. They were tears of peace. Nathan kissed the top of Sophie's head, then Maya's temple. "You're right, little fish," he murmured. "We always were." And under the glow of the fairy lights, as laughter and music carried through the park, the Benton Parker family began their next chapter. Not with wealth or power, but with love, trust, and the promise that no matter what storms came, they would face them together. Because sometimes the most unexpected love story begins not with perfection, but with spilled drinks, awkward mistakes, and a little girl who asked the right question at the right time. And sometimes, just sometimes, the happily ever after is even better than the fairy tale.